of The Flower of Freedom by Deborah J. Reeves. All rights to both the book and the presentation are reserved. The chair is there for you to settle yourself in your imagination. We're providing a place of relaxation and comfort, we hope. That's what our wish for you is anyway. Here we go, Chapter 133, Uruguay in January. The first Sunday of the new year, the Lagardes hosted a brunch. Bianca's mother was delighted when Bianca asked to invite Jeff Maxwell. She had feared that she would have to arrange the seating with Damien drooling at Bianca. She shuddered as she remembered the knowing looks and winks when Bianca was a teenager and Damien had been her boyfriend. She had been so grateful when that stage was finally over. When Bianca married Bertie, Delilah thought her motherly duties towards the headstrong girl were over. Bertie, she had thought, would be Bianca's first wise choice, one that would set her on the path to a normal life. Thank God, they had thought, that he came along at such an important juncture. How wrong was that thought? Both she and her husband had been astounded when Bianca invaded their home again, without the child, thank goodness. She had no illusion about who would have to raise any child of Bianca's. How awkward would that have been, though, to have Damien with his big feet back under their table, openly ogling their daughter after they shared an evening together, she wondered. She was relieved that they would not be subjected to that horror, at least not for the time being, she surmised. Her husband was well pleased by Bianca's wish to invite Jeff, and he insisted that his friend Hans should be invited as well. Happy to attend, Jeff and Hans took Hans' cigarette boat from Buenos Aires, and the Lagarde chauffeur picked them up at the dock, not far from the house. They were dressed in khaki pants and linen shirts. Around their necks they wore heavy gold jewelry. They laughed at one another's jokes, and they exuded bonhomie. No one knew what either of them did for a living, but it didn't matter to anyone, not really, because they were rich and charming and happy. Others from the Lagarde social set were also invited, and everyone accepted the invitation. The table was full, the food was fabulous, outstanding French burgundy flowed. Everyone was relaxed and in good spirits. Sitting side by side, Jeff and Bianca talked all the way through the brunch. Jeff was a charming table mate, and Bianca understood, in a strange subliminal way, that he had absolutely no interest in her as a woman. For a moment she wondered if he was gay, but what did it matter to her? He was perfect friend material. His sense of humor was wicked and sarcastic, just the way she liked it, and he was a font of gossip about people she did not care for. His jokes were urbane and funny, and often crude enough to make even her blush. He hung on her every word. Perfect. She had found her new best friend, the first of her life. She was certain of that after brunch, when she found him wandering the upper hallway of the house for no apparent reason. She invited him into her bedroom, and he went straight to a closet to look at her taste in fashion. He rummaged around in her cosmetics bag and in her vanity drawers, without any sense of it being even slightly improper. He told her that he approved, and he had a lot more to say when he got to her intimate apparel. She had seldom laughed so hard in her entire life. The luncheon guests moved out into the garden after everyone had sampled the rare cognac that Hans had brought. The Lagardes were bowled over by his generosity and his reach. When asked, he told his host that he had a man who finds things for him and to think nothing of it. His nonchalant generosity and grace made him even more valued. Once outside, Jeff and Bianca sat together at the poolside for a while until Jeff excused himself, saying that he had to go and cultivate that boring couple from the German embassy. He stooped with his head down for a moment as he retied his shoes, with his face directed toward the lawn so that no one but Bianca could hear his acerbic comments. Jeff had expressed his perspective of their sex life. Until then, Hans had not looked in Bianca's direction. As Bianca sat, eyes closed, in her flowered mini dress, with her shoes kicked off onto the lawn next to her chair, Hans sauntered over, and he startled her slightly when he asked if he might sit next to her. Secretly pleased, Bianca waved her hand to invite him to sit down. Soon they were engaged in stimulating conversation. Bianca suspected that Hans was interested in her because of his many questions about her life in Canada. She told him of her terrible in-laws, most especially her sister-in-law, who thought she owned her brother Bertie. She told him that while those in-laws had bought them cars for a wedding present, her parents had bought them a house. She saw Hans' startled reaction, and she assumed that he was indignant on her behalf, so she took that as a license to insert her version of events. Bertie, her husband, but not for long, she assured Hans, was an engineer by training who had started a construction company. While he was taking his time with the renovations, placing her on a ridiculously restricted budget, she had to live in a poky little apartment, not fit for a monkey. She herself was in training with the world-renowned neurosurgeon Dr. Wilder Penfield, and she was excelling in her studies despite the dire conditions with which she had to deal. She had finished her exams and decided that because the house was not yet finished, she would visit her parents, who at least knew proper etiquette. Hans wondered if they made many friends as a couple. She wrinkled her nose, and she told him that she herself had made friends at the university, but she could hardly be expected to join with the group of lifetime friends of Bertie's. He'd been athletic until a serious accident while playing hockey in Europe had ended his sporting aspirations. All of his friends from those days were undereducated tradesmen and laborers. His parents socialized with old people and neighbors, none of whom had more than a basic living, and all of whom tried to run his life by sucking them into organized celebrations on every holiday. "I'm not invested there, I assure you," she finished. That's the end of chapter 133. Please come back for our next chapter. It's called The Prey is in Sight. I remain